What if other teams tried something very Bazball-ish?
This is the last knot. My dad told me to say this.
I think the concept of Bazball has been slightly misunderstood. People think to copy it means you have to smack the ball. That is what England is doing because that is what their speciality was. They had no one who could hit the red ball, so they brought in a bunch who could smash the white ball around and tried that. That is the key of Bazball, is how to double down on your talent and make the most out of it. So I was wondering what other teams could do to heighten their advantage, and India was the first team that made a lot of sense to me. And I'm talking about this now, and it's a bit silly, because the kind of wicket I think they could try my style on was not what we just saw in this test match. In the middle session, the pitch flattened out so much that no one played a poor shot or lost a wicket, which is also incredible because one of the early tests didn't even last a session, if I recall correctly. The other thing that we saw today was actual seam bowling. Today I thought Umesh bowled a really good spell in the middle and Mohammad Shami hit the stumps a couple of times, but most importantly, the seamers could bowl throughout the game because there was a little bit there for them, even trying short balls in the afternoon. So it meant that the seamers were a factor all the way through. In this actual series, the Indian quicks have been taking some wickets, but that's been a minor miracle because they have barely bowled. And this series has been a bit of an outlier, as usually you can see the spinners have been doing a lot better than the quicks. But coming into today, the seamers had bowled 20% of the deliveries in the series so far. That's a little bit lower than usual, where in India it's usually 25%. But if we take what India tells us they want to do and continue making these huge turning surfaces, why take in two seamers when you barely use them, especially if your team isn't making any runs? So I want you to imagine that we're looking at a pitch that is very similar to the first three tests. You know it will spin like crazy and there probably won't be any bounce. And for India, you also know that they have the three best spinners in the world, so any seamer you have will not be as potent as your spinners. And this is where my point comes in. If you know that the pitches will help your spinners, but you won't use your seam that much, and you have the best tweakers in the world who can bowl with the new ball. So my question is, do you need any seamers at all, or even a fourth bowler? Let's start with the seam question. India bowl about 25% of their bowling with the quicks at home. But that includes the pitches where you need or want a seamer. My plan is for the wickets where you do not want or need to even think about a seamer. Like say the last pitch at indoor. So it's fair to say you can just drop that 20% of seam away altogether and just rely on your spinners. Despite the fact that in the UAE, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, even Zimbabwe at times, we've seen hugely spinning wickets that don't really help quick bowlers at all. We don't see a lot of all spin attacks. And yet when it's green, when it's bouncy, when it's swinging, we see all seam attacks. So while it sounds radical, I think there's a lot of common sense there. And it's a lot less zany than my other idea, which is for India to only go into a game with three bowlers. This flies in the face of all known cricket knowledge, which I suppose so does England's recent batting. So let me try and sell you this. Since the start of 2020, R. Ashwin has bowled almost a third of all deliveries in India. That is crazy, especially in what is usually a five-man attack. And in Akshar Patel, and now you have 50%. Ravi Jadeja hasn't even been fit that much, but he takes them up to 65%. And that's also without Akshar and Jadeja playing together that much. I mean, my question is, do you even need any other bowlers if these three are fit and available for you? So what does that allow you as a team? Well, either Akshar or Ashwin is going to bat at number 11, with your keeper at number 9, and you will have 7 specialist batters. This is a stupid lineup. But if your spinners are doing the bulk of the bowling and your batters are struggling because they are hard pitches to play on, surely this is the best option. If you bat to number 11, someone is probably going to make runs for you in every game. And you still have your 3 most important bowlers. Life is good. Now, of course, this is quite a change for India because they are used to picking 5 bowlers, which in a 3-day test does seem optimistic. So my assumption is that they would want a backup. You could drop one of these specialist batters and pick Hardik Pandya. Or if you want to ruin my idea a little bit, you could always just pick one specialist seamer. But I still love the idea of India just going into a match with the 3 best spinners in the world and no one else. But there are a lot of things that can go wrong. Because I know it makes sense, but I also have spent enough time around crusty old cricket coaches to know what the problems will be. And the first is injuries. You are stuffed if you take 3 bowlers in and one gets hurt. Even though we were talking about spinners and the chance of injury is lower, it's still there. And of course, there is a way to mitigate this a little bit. You could play Washington Sundar as one of your batters and still have a backup if needed. But there is another quirk that stops India from using only 3 bowlers. The game is changing. And in modern cricket, batters don't bowl much. For India, you could argue that they don't bowl, well, at all. Shreyas Iyer's surprise over today was a reminder of just how rarely we see the Indian top order bowl any overs, unless Jadeja's batting there. But let's look at all cricket first. Your first 4 bowlers deliver 84% of your overs since 2001. That makes sense. The other 11% is from your 5th bowler. And remember, not all teams have them. Australia was a team without a 5th option for a very long time. But even when teams do, in most matches, you still really end up with your 5th bowler used not that much. So they are rarely as handy as you think they are. But it's insurance and also variety. But really, through the last few years, teams have stopped using their batters for part-time bowling pretty much all around the world. In the past, players like Chris Harris and Michael Clarke, Graham Hicks, Sachin Tendulkar all bowled as the 5th or sometimes 6th option. That doesn't happen much now unless the batter is very good at bowling in certain spots, like say Joe Root against left-handers. And there are 2 reasons for this. Generally, the reason that batters bowl less in the second half of their career compared to the first half is because the second half of their career they get a lot of injuries. If you spend your whole life bending over a bat, eventually your back will get stiff, not to mention arm, wrist, finger injuries. And as sports science came in, some teams started to believe that bowling was causing some of the problems with backs and shoulders of their star batters. Also, with analysts, we now have the ability to really have a look at part-timers, and there's a reason most of them are part-timers. They don't usually work that much. But the other reason is, around 15 years ago, it was very common to see batters bowling in the nets, perfecting their part-timers, working on new things, and the captain might also see them, meaning they're in their minds more. That doesn't happen anymore. 2 things have happened since. Teams now have professional throwdown people who travel the world and throw balls at them, and net bowls are far more available as so many players are on contract at domestic places. There's always someone available to bowl to an international player in the nets. So this is how often the 6th bowler is used just for India. I mean, wow. If there was a hint of a pattern in the world game to go away from part-timers bowling, India have almost ended their 6th bowler as a choice. There are 2 years here where they didn't even use their 4th change bowler once in a year. I think partly this tells you how good their bowling has been, but also when it comes to delivering overs, their batters are out. And this is of course not an exact science, and the 5th bowler thing can be very interesting because obviously some teams do have a 5th bowler and some teams don't. But it does give you an idea that we are probably moving away from batters bowling. Test cricket is becoming more specialist, which kind of makes sense. And why am I mentioning all this? Well, imagine India took my 3 bowler lineup into a test, and one of those spinners got injured. That means that Shreyas Iyer or Rohit Sharma is suddenly the 3rd bowler, and they don't bowl. I think from a strategy point of view, my plan makes sense on the bowling side, but from a batters who bowl position, it does not. But I do think India can continue with their ragging home wickets and have even more success by having the extra batting. Hardik Pandya may not be the right player because they may not want to use his body in that way. He may not even be ready to bowl as much as I would like him to. But I would love to see him as a number 8. But you could certainly use Washington Sundar. He could bat at number 8 in my lineup and only bowl if things are not going well or someone is hurt. Or if India wanted to try diet Bazball, they could simply drop a seamer and bring in a specialist batter. Under MS Dhoni, Team India was obsessed with having 5 bowlers. And in that period, especially away, it made a lot of sense. But at home, with the 3 best spinners in the world, they just don't need that 5th bowler. Or, if you ask me, the 4th bowler.